Hello everyone. It has been some time since I've been here. It's good to be back. It's been almost 2 weeks. I've been busy, then I was sick, and somehow I couldn't find time to record anything. I wanted to talk about a book that I recently read. It's a short one, but a very profound one. It's by Viktor Frankl, with L at the end. He's a Holocaust survivor. He survived 4 different concentration camps, and his main focus was on man's search for meaning in life. It's very interesting to see how he sees the world in a context of what he's been through. I have to say this is the type of book that it's worth to read not only just once, because I think if you read it once, you may still miss on some jewels, some really juicy pieces of knowledge and understanding on what life is and what purpose of life is. So I will definitely come back to it, but I was so fascinated by the book that after I read it, I already borrowed it to my friend. The author of the book was a Jew. He was a psychologist and a neurologist. He survived, and he wrote a very interesting book where he tries to understand why anyone survived, because they were in such horrific conditions there that it's just amazing that anyone would survive this ordeal. And he even counted the probability of survival, and he claims in the book that only one person in 28 people would survive this. And obviously, the first part of the book, he talks a lot about his experiences in the camp. And the second part of the book, he talks about his logotherapy, so his way of treating people that have issues with, mostly neurosis, anxiety, and what have you, psychological issues, basically. And in both parts of the book, he gives examples and his own understanding on what meaning of life is and what it means for each and every individual. So what I've learned from the book is that there are 3 main meanings of life for people. One is, for example, someone does the deed or takes an action that gives them meaning. So it could be their life's work, it could be something they do for others. For example, they are volunteering, they're doing good, and they feel well because of this. So it brings them meaning. They feel needed, they feel indispensable in their field, could be anything. Now, second way to look at this is by meeting a person. And I think he meant romantic relationships. So, for example, you live for the other person, but it could also mean some deep friendships. Basically, you find meaning in living for other people. And the third one, I don't have a copy with me now, I'm not 100% sure, but he said that people should realize that some people realize that their life in itself is meaningful. He gave a nice example of what he actually means by this. So whenever someone in a camp was attempting to do suicide, their main objective to living was that they don't find anything to expect from life anymore, and that's why they want to end it. And he often convinced these people not to do this by explaining that it doesn't matter what you expect from the life, what matters is what life expects from you. I think what he meant is that you cannot predict what your path has been. created by the universe. You are, yes, you are in hell on earth, but you have no knowledge what tomorrow will bring. Maybe there will be some opportunities for you waiting to be discovered. Perhaps you will survive. Perhaps you will help someone, change someone else's life, or you will do something that will bring you meaning. Or perhaps there already is something in your life that is meaningful, but because you're depressed, you don't see it. So he advised to live the life as if the life is questioning us. In a sense that instead of demanding something from life, we should ask ourselves, what is it that life wants from me? You're here to do something. Maybe it's not clear for you yet, because, well, we cannot really see the future, like total future. We can predict some bits and pieces. Maybe we can see the next turn on our journey ahead of us, but we don't see the whole river, and we are just flowing through life. So there may be some things planned for us ahead of us, and I don't want to bring any belief in God or deity per se, saying that God has planned for you, but I think we as creators, perhaps before we even come here, we pave a way. Maybe we choose what we want to go through, and then we forget. Then we come here, and then we have to figure out how to solve problems. So perhaps this is also meaningful, that maybe it's not always easy and nice, and it's not always joyous, but whenever you fix a problem, solve an issue, you do feel a kind of a feeling of achievement, I think. I think many people have that. So life per se can be meaningful, even if we don't see it so. Perhaps we should be less demanding of life and start asking ourselves what life wants from us, and what can we do as an individual to make the place better for others. And I think this is also meaningful. And it can be something small. And it doesn't matter if it's small or big. It doesn't matter what you do. But if you do it with good intentions and with proper conduct, then your life is valuable just because of that. And also he said that there are certain factors that a person should avoid in order not to deteriorate. And he said that the most challenging part was not only being in a camp, but also after being liberated, people had issues with adjusting to new situation. Basically, he said that just because an evil was done to you, it doesn't sanctify you doing evil to others. And he saw this many times with people who basically, from being a victim, turned into being a perpetrator towards others because they felt like something has been taken from them, so now they have a right to rob other people. There was one solution to this issue, and the solution was to talk a sense to these people, to convince them that just because they suffered, it's not okay to make other people suffer too, because that's just a vicious circle and it's not helpful for anyone. And if someone didn't listen to this advice, they would in future deteriorate completely. That was also quite interesting to read about, because I haven't thought of it, but the way he put it was quite logical. Also, he warned about losing meaning in your life, because that was very dangerous, especially in terrible conditions they were put in. If someone lost meaning and you couldn't convince them, they would probably die out of despair, or they would commit suicide. Some people just gave up completely, and even if you shouted at them or tried to beat them and motivate them into work, they would just lie in bed, and they understood that if they light a cigarette, in the camp, cigarettes were like money. Basically, you could exchange it for extra ratio of food. So if they saw someone just sitting and not doing anything, smoking, it was an indicator that they will be dead in a few days. And many people went through that, and he witnessed it many, many times, so they could accurately predict who will die next, which was also quite unnerving, to say the least. So I think it's very important to have that sense of meaning of your life. And he also explained what meaning of life can be for person to person. And it says it's very different because each individual is different, and the meaning of life can change from hour to hour even. And it's all about circumstances you're in, and what you can do, what you can't do, what you can control, what you can't. But basically what I've learned, meaning is basically your attitude towards your circumstances. So he explained a very nice phenomenon of paradoxal intention. He was using this technique to help patients with different sorts of anxiety and neurosis and things like that. So the example he gave regarding the paradoxal intention was that think of a sleeplessness issue. So whenever a patient couldn't sleep, he would advise them to not focus about not sleeping, because that's what patients usually worry about, that, oh, I cannot sleep, and they worry about the effects of not sleeping. And it causes anticipatory anxiety and hypertension, and the result is just sleeplessness. So he would advise them to focus on not falling asleep, which would cause another hypertension, but towards not falling asleep. And usually the result was the opposite, which is sleep. So they would try to stay awake, and finally they would fall asleep. And you can use it for many different scenarios, although he says that this is not a panacea. But yeah, another example was a patient who had severe anxiety, which would manifest itself with sweating and perspirating too much. He said that he could use this paradoxal intention also to his advantage by adding humor to it. So whenever he would sweat in a social occasion and become nervous about it, he advised him to say, okay, I sweat only like 1 liter, next time let's sweat 2. And in this way, this patient would form a detachment from the situation, and usually with time the anxiety and symptom caused by the anxiety would dissipate with time. So I found it quite fascinating that he mentions this, especially thinking about the context of the book and everything. So that's all what I wanted to talk about. I hope you found some value from this episode. See you next